Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It feels like Monday, but it isn't. This may be the first time that we've ever had to announce a Wednesday that feels like a Monday, which I guess is great news because that means we're halfway done with the week and it feels like we're just beginning. Wednesday, July 5th, and that's the reason for it. Now you can put it all together. July 5th, 2023. Time for another show. Time for another year of independence, I guess. And, how was your July 4th? We did take the day off. We ended up doing that a couple of reasons, not the least of which is America. And honestly, if you have another reason why we ought to throw you out of this country. Except anyway, it was a very nice day. Apparently, news reports say the hottest on record, globally speaking. So that kind of sucks. But no hotter than usual where we were. So, of course, that will mean that no one will believe anything, et cetera, and we'll go on making things worse. As a matter of fact, yeah, I guess I did. I participated in making things worse yesterday because I was so excited about the possibility of saving some money in my effort to make things worse, I guess. Yesterday, the Sheetz gas station around us, I don't know whether it was all the Sheetz or I don't know, regionally or whatever, but they put on a big promotion. It seemed relatively patriotic thing to do, right? They put their gas, all grades of gas, on sale for the same price, and they tried to make it $17.76. They could have probably, these days, it's $17.76 a gallon. Fantastic. It's probably what it ought to be, but it isn't. It was $1.77 6/10. Remember that they still use tenths of a cent in pricing gasoline? I wonder when they're going to get rid of that. Anyway, I guess that's an easy way for them to state a price and then round it up by a penny and have nobody complain about it. So I guess I'll probably never get rid of it. Anyway, $1.77 6/10 of a cent per gallon was the promotion. Of course, when we finally got there, we used their, my wife has gone in for the Sheetz pump and pay app thing, which I guess is a good idea in terms of, everybody else has your information. Why not the gas station? And in exchange, they'll give you 3 cents off a gallon, which, as nice as that was, also rendered the whole exercise moot since, I guess we all started celebrating our independence in the 1740s. Thanks to the 3 cents off per gallon. But additional savings, we were almost out of gas in the minivan, no less. So, it was kind of an exciting prospect to fill up the minivan 17 plus gallons of gas for under $30. It has been a while since that's happened. And now, of course, it dawns on me. I still need the gas regardless of whether or not I think it's a good idea. But, so here I am. I celebrated July 4th by waiting in line for more gas to ruin the planet, even though it was already the hottest day on record. So, time to move, I guess, to an electric vehicle, although I guess energy economists could point out to me how much fossil fuel gets burned in order to recharge my electric vehicle as well. So, we need to move to solar electric charged vehicles or whatever, and we needed to do it 200 years ago, and we hadn't even invented the cars yet, so it was very difficult to make it all work. But certainly true. Gave us a chance to rerun the July 5th, 2022 show, which was only when I was plugging it into the system and getting it prepared for justice to use yesterday that I realized, and then I realized, oh my God, we haven't realized this, and now it's a story, that yesterday was not just July 4th, but the anniversary of the Highland Park, Illinois mass shooting. We're almost always on a mass shooting or the anniversary of one. I know, and we've gotten jaded to the whole thing, but that's actually the point of yesterday's rerun, was that we had this incredible mass shooting that had happened, at a small town, middle America, July 4th parade in the most idyllic setting you could imagine, and along the main street and everything, and some lunatic climbs up on top of one of the low-lying shops lining the front of this main street and just shooting indiscriminately into the crowd. And, of course, everyone remembers it when prompted, I think, but the fact is that we had to be prompted, and we have to be reminded. And sometimes we say, I have to be reminded of which shooting is it that you're talking about when you name the city that it happened in, because that's how many of these things we have. And, of course, the July 4th weekend didn't pass without its own brand new mass shooting. 5 people killed in Philadelphia, but it was Monday night, so I guess it doesn't count as July 4th. But certainly the July 4th area, should count for something, I think. And we pass by. Really, the point here is just how many mass shootings we sort of accept as routine, and nothing new for this audience. But I just thought I would use the holiday to point that out, and to point out that we could actually have an exceptional mass shooting that usually grabs our attention, and we'll never forget the anniversary date either, and not because it has personal significance to us for whatever reason, but because it's July 4th, and yet still, I don't know, I don't see how anything like as ridiculous as a mass shooting at a July 4th parade could ever be forgotten, but I forgot it along with many other people, so I'm ashamed of myself for having done that, and now you have. I don't know. Now you won't forget it again. Next year you'll remember. Greg Dworkin may have remembered. I don't know. He remembered to come back on Wednesday anyway, even though it probably, I guess all days feel more or less the same now. Good morning, Greg. How are you doing?
All days feel Wednesdays. They all feel hump day. I have to admit, I'm extraordinarily disappointed in you.
Oh, well, me too.
But not for the reasons you think.
Oh, all right.
Not for the reasons you expressed.
Oh, well, here's what you need to know about why Greg is disappointed in me.
Well, you came on the show and you said that you're going to talk about how you tried to save some money and make things worse, and I was certain you were going to announce that you had bought Twitter.
Oh, yeah. I wish I had been able to put that money together. I meant to do that.
So
but
now
with the
I'm doubly
savings from
disappointed
gasoline,
because you didn't buy Twitter, and Twitter still sucks.
Yeah, well, I'm going to buy the Republican alternative to Twitter. I'm going to create a new one, and that may have been done already, but it doesn't matter because they don't look at that either.
Socially truthful. But, at the same time, you maybe could have used your Sheets card and gotten 3 cents off.
Yeah, and I could have put that towards the purchase of Threads, the new Twitter thingy, Twitter competitor.
Yeah, Blue Sky apparently exists, but nobody can get on, so nobody knows really what it's like.
Right, and it's started by the guy who started Twitter, Jack Dorsey, who just spent his weekend endorsing RFK Jr. for president, in case you thought tech bros ever got smarter.
Yeah, RFK is absolutely insane, and he's being backed by GOP big dark money. So that's everything you need to know about RFK, who is not JFK.
When he wasn't being backed by their dark money, he was insane.
Yeah, but he's still insane. So I actually have a lovely profile about how insane he is by Rebecca Traister that I ran, I think, over the weekend. But we'll get to that maybe.
Oh. All right, it's a maybe.
I wanted to celebrate July 4th not by shoot-em-ups, which really happened all over the country. So it's becoming the day of the year that more people get shot than any other.
Yes, that's true. Although it was always also true. It is the biggest. It's the semi-annual celebratory gunfire does come back to the ground day. But I haven't collected those stories yet.
So I wanted to celebrate July 4th by trying to understand July 4th.
Oh, all right.
Before I get to that, though, a couple of short things here just to notice. Lynn Wood, you may recall, was an insane. RFK isn't the only insane person. Lynn Wood is an insane lawyer who was partially on the Trump team. At least he says he was. But nobody could work with him, so it's unclear what happened. He's offered the Georgia bar what he hopes is an offer they can't refuse.
Oh, yeah?
Instead of disbarring him, he'll simply completely and totally retire from the practice of law forever.
All right. No.
And I'm not sure they're going to take him up on that.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean...
They may disbar him and retire him from practice of law forever. I mean,
that's an interesting offer.
Too.
Right. They could say, I'll tell you what, why don't we retire you from the practice of law forever?
Right. Another thing, and I think I sent it to you, If I didn't, I should have. But Scott McFarlane posted a really chilling, haunting image, speaking of shoot-em-ups. This is a still image from recently filed U.S. Capitol riot case. Feds say this image was taken from a court-ordered search of a January 6th defendant's phone.
Uh-huh.
And what it is a defendant taking a picture of security and Secret Service, guns drawn, pointing directly at him, that he took on the phone.
That's good.
Did I send that to you? If I didn't, I should have.
I don't think I've seen the
right
picture, but holy moly.
Right, yeah, it's right at the bottom.
It reminds me of that cartoon from a couple of years ago of like if the Titanic sank today, right, with all the people in the water taking pictures of the boat as it goes down.
Yeah, texting.
Just kind of like, I mean, on the other hand, there's like, well, you should document if this has happened on the street, right? These police are inappropriately drawing their guns and pointing them at me. People do document that with their phones all the time. It's just a little extraordinary because of the setting.
Yeah, so it's really amazing, and that puts into context, July 4th, and the fact that Team Republican voters are willing to vote for them, despite the fact that they downplay this January 6th stuff, just is highlighted by this picture.
Yeah, that's
and the seriousness
true.
of
Good
it.
point. Like
they were just tourists,
right? To come away with the impression
and you
that
go, what? They were just. What are you talking about?
Yeah, we were right here. We should have been let in there, and I'm surprised that there was any resistance at all. It was a loving
in the
affair.
broken glass, they were pointing guns at us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and, the guy's phone is intact and his head is intact. And look, you're lucky that these law enforcement officers somehow, for some crazy reason, decided to practice some restraint with you. Usually not the case elsewhere in the country for others.
So, wow.
Interesting picture. I mean, you had to imagine that one such picture existed somewhere. They were pointing their guns at someone. There were other people on the other side of those guns. Okay, that's wild.
That's wild. So this. By
the way, I noticed that these guys didn't think that his cell phone was a gun.
I guess not.
That happens quite a lot.
They were being very careful. Of course, they were very close up.
Yes, they could see very well.
On Monday, we had a show, and so I presented some of this information. I'm not sure anymore because I didn't listen to it before today's show, and I forgot what we talked about and what we didn't talk about.
Yeah, me too.
But I'm going to talk about a couple of things in terms of July 4th and understanding July 4th. Let me start with Jill Lawrence.
Okay.
Who writes, seeing the erosion of our freedoms makes it hard to celebrate this 4th of July. The Supreme Court, conservative governors, and gerrymandered state legislatures are racing to shrink our fundamental rights and freedoms. This is something we do understand. It's illustrated by one of those time-lapse photos of fireworks going on, framing the Capitol and the Washington Monument, which is always lovely. Mm-hmm. And, of course, reminds us about the true meaning of July 4th. Joey Chestnut won his 16th Nathan's hot dog eating contest with 62. And there's video of it that you do not have to watch. But, Jill talks about some of the big issues here: abortion, voting,
hot dogs,
guns. Right. And points out red and blue states are not monolithic. Therefore, we should stop pretending, for example, there's no injured parties when red states ban abortion or make it easy for teenagers and careless people to buy whatever weapons they want. Yes. In other words, there are Democrats in these states. There are as many Democrats in places like Montana, as there are on Long Island. We should also stop pretending we're 50 walled-off states, each deciding how many freedoms we should enjoy or how many it gets to restrict. Guns cross state lines. People who need abortions cross state lines. We're in this together, and Congress and the court should be protecting our rights, not encouraging a free-for-all that leaves some states with far less democracy than others, and some Americans feeling far less equal than others.
All right.
Thomas Zimmer talks about the rogue court versus modern democracy, and a disastrous week for those who prefer to live in a multiracial, pluralistic democracy.
Yes.
Jonathan Weiler has a wonderfully themed Substack, which he calls Jonathan's Quality Fetching Newsletter. Jonathan Weiler is an expert on authoritarians and wrote a book about it, which I interviewed him for on Daily Kos back in the day.
But he's an authority on authoritarians.
Right. On the affirmative action ruling, what it did, who it affected, what its end means. And he does this from the point of view of a college professor. We may have talked about this on Monday. And then Tom Nichols has a piece reclaiming real American patriotism, the 4th of July. Let's rescue our love of country from those who have hijacked it.
All right. I mean,
and, he's a New Englander. He was born in Massachusetts in the Berkshires, educated in Boston. And he was awash in thoughts of lobster rolls and saltwater, he writes, as I neared the dunes on Cape Cod. And then that damn tearjerker of a John Denver song about West Virginia came on the car radio. And that song isn't really about West Virginia. It was inspired by locales in Maryland and Massachusetts. But I've been to West Virginia. I know it's beautiful. And I've never wanted to live anywhere but New England. But, I give a thought to West Virginia every time I hear Take Me Home Country Roads.
Sure.
And that's when I experienced, he writes, the jolt of a feeling we used to think of as patriotism, the joyful love of country. Mm-hmm. Patriotism, unlike its ugly half-brother nationalism, is rooted in optimism and confidence. Nationalism is a sour inferiority complex, a sullen attachment to blood and soil fantasies that's always looking abroad with insecurity and hatred. So I was taking in the New England shoreline, but seeing in my mind the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I felt moved with wonder and gratitude for the miracle that's the United States. And I miss that feeling because usually when I think of West Virginia these days, my first thought is red state. I now see many voters there, and in other states as my civic opponents, and I know that many of them likely hear Boston and think of me as their enemy. And I feel that I'm at a great distance from so many of my fellow citizens as do they, and I'm sure people like them think about that, about people like me, and I hate it. And he's just talking about the fact that, take a case like West Virginia used to be, you heard country roads and, great, wonderful. Mm-hmm. And now all you think about is, it's a red state, yuck.
Maybe.
And that's terrible, and that's something lost, and, he's quite right.
I think that's a good point. Certainly, it does. It's a little harder.
And as Joe Lawrence points out,
here.
plenty of Democrats in West Virginia.
True. Yes.
Don't write them off.
Right. One of them's a senator, allegedly. So, they may have a different idea about what it means to be a Democrat. That's true.
One of them's a senator. Then there's Joe Manchin.
Yeah. I'm a little less mushy about West Virginia because it's right here. I mean, they're on my roads every day.
Yeah, and you don't want it back.
Right. I mean, it's a wonderful place and all. And by the way, the locales in Maryland actually being the inspiration. A lot of Maryland is pretty much West Virginia. So, it wraps around as well. They intertwine. Right. And Western Maryland is a completely different place. So,
other things to add that we may or may not have touched upon but are still relevant. Classified documents probe reportedly ongoing even after Trump indictment. This is a report at the end of June. With Donald Trump already indicted, the special counsel's office is no longer investigating the classified doc scandal, right? Well, no.
Oh.
So this is when we learned 3 weeks after former President Donald J. Trump was indicted on charges of illegally retaining national security records and obstructing the government's efforts to reclaim them. Mm-hmm. The federal grand jury in Miami is still investigating aspects of the case. In recent days, the grand jury has issued subpoenas to a handful of people who are connected to the inquiry, those familiar with it said. So that's always interesting, and that's not unusual. Say the lawyers who do this for a living, trial lawyers.
Yeah, those
kind of guys. Say.
Okay, not unusual.
Because there's always little ends to tie up. And because the trial takes like a forever and a century, so you have time to do this. Mm-hmm. And multiple sources were quoted who said the special counsel's office is continuing its investigation.
I see.
But, you never know. This may help explain, Steve Bannon writes, why the former president referred to Smith this week, Jack Smith, as deranged. And speaking of Trump's indictment, thanks to an instantly infamous recording, most of the recent focus has been on Trump's apparent willingness to present highly confidential war plans. Secret. Yes. This is secret information. Look at this, Trump said, adding, isn't this incredible? It is so cool.
That's the
But the
weirdest
indictment
line.
also pointed to an alleged meeting in which the former president showed a classified map to somebody who was described as a representative of his political action committee, who we now know as Susie Wiles, which we
Right.
talked about. And this is just amazing because during the run against Hillary Clinton, there's plenty of tape about Trump talking about how terrible it would be if a presidential candidate was under indictment and how difficult it would be, and it's impossible, and you can't have that situation.
No, of course not.
And so you could expect Biden to play a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and we all know what his former words will mean to him, Trump himself. Okay, so we'll be the ones to value them. Sure, why not? We do all the work. With
some other
everything.
stuff, speaking of legal, an interesting situation here. As you know, affirmative action was ended by the courts as we know it, which doesn't mean it was ended. It just ended as we know it.
Yeah, right. I didn't even
So
know
one
it
of the
that
first
well.
things that happened is that some groups took a look and said, you know what? If you're going to go ahead and, quote, fix things the way Elon Musk fixed Twitter,
Right.
why don't we go ahead and fix these legacy admission things, which basically are which white people getting in, and that's unfair, and it's an unearned benefit. We need to do something about that.
Mm-hmm.
So a complaint was filed, not just a sternly worded letter, but a complaint.
Yes.
All right, and this is from a procedural point of view interesting.
Okay.
Harvard University was accused by minority groups of violating federal law, says Bloomberg, by giving preferential treatment in the admissions process to children of alumni and wealthy donors, days after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the use of race-based affirmative action. The long-standing practice of legacy admissions flouts a provision of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that bars racial discrimination in programs that receive federal funds because about 70% of legacy admissions are white, the group said.
Yes.
What they did is they didn't sue. They filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education.
All right.
All right. And why is that significant? As Joyce Aileen, the legal analyst, Joyce Vance, writes, in the wake of SCOTUS's decision to end affirmative action in higher education, a group of students filed a complaint with the Department of Education challenging Harvard's use of legacy and donor status.
Okay.
This is not a lawsuit filed in federal court. It's a complaint filed with an executive branch agency. That was the right approach here, and it's worth taking a moment to understand why, as challenges of this type begin to percolate. Why don't you just file a lawsuit in federal court? Because the cases SCOTUS decided alleged Harvard and University of North Carolina engaged in intentional discrimination, the affirmative use of race as criteria for admissions. Individuals can challenge intentional discrimination in court under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and the 14th Amendment. But the challenge to legacy status isn't about intentional discrimination. It's disparate impact.
Okay.
Objections to a practice that has the effect of discriminating, regardless of the intent.
Okay.
Title VI of the Civil Rights Act prohibits recipients of federal financial dollars, which is to say the schools, from discriminating based on race, color, or national origin. But a SCOTUS case, Alexander v. Sandoval, says individuals can't sue for disparate impact.
Because they don't have standing. But guess what?
Sandoval means the disparate impact claims like the ones here must be brought by a plaintiff like the Department of Education.
Yes,
So
okay.
bringing this complaint directly to the Department of Education starts the process.
Yes, I see.
Then you can
That
tee
is
up the
interesting.
issue. Then the Department of Education can sue.
Yeah. Give them
So
standing.
again, these things take time. And when you're doing this in a legal sense, you have to be very careful and follow the letter of the law. That's the deal with the rule of law.
Well, maybe.
And it appears slow, but there's a method to the madness here.
Okay. Is it possible? Couldn't somebody at the Department of Education just fake it and say that they were contacted by someone who complained, and then it turns out that the complaint is fake?
That
works,
It happened
too.
at a website they don't have.
Yeah, right. I mean, I understand that's legal basis for standing now. So they should have tried that. But okay, they went the old school and
They
actually
went the old
complained.
school right way.
Yeah.
The Department of Education has an office called the
That's good,
Office
'cause
for
Harvard is an
Civil
old
Rights,
school.
OCR, that litigates these issues in court. And for almost 6 decades, the OCR at Education, working with DOJ, has enforced Title VI, the regulations that implement it.
All right.
Now that
New
affirmative
title.
action is gone, It's time to deal with the lasting impact of historic discrimination in education. And if Ron DeSantis is upset about the use of critical race theory, just think about how this is going to set him up.
Yeah. I'm sure he'll be angry about that and fight with, I don't know, who's left to fight with. They'll find somebody he hasn't picked on yet.
Right. Speaking of which, it's sort of kind of interesting, but there was a piece Ben Collins, I have this in the pundit roundup, let me send it to you.
Okay.
A tweet Ben Collins sent noting something of interest, and that is bettors on PredictIt, who aren't always right.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Have Joe Biden at 42 cents of the dollar, the big favorite to win in 2024. Trump is 29.
Okay.
Gavin Newsom is 16. Ron DeSantis is 15. Kamala Harris is 3.
Oh, hey, all right. Throw in a couple.
In other words, Gavin Newsom, according to the bettors, has a better chance of being president than Ron DeSantis.
Okay.
I thought, not that that says good things about Gavin Newsom, but it says a lot of bad things about Ron DeSantis.
It does, yeah. A crowded few. I mean, I guess you only have $1 to work with, so I suppose it's possible.
Right. Why is Kamala Harris only a 3? Because basically these are white tech bros that bet.
Oh, okay.
Who absolutely do not understand Kamala Harris's appeal to certain segments of the Democratic base. They just don't get it. It's not on the radar.
All right. Yeah, I guess so. Although
they would be approved by this whole scheme here with Biden on top and Harris at the bottom would be approved by Supreme Court because they're colorblind.
Oh yeah. Well, then they're all right with it. But yeah, I mean, well, Kamala Harris
just like the tech bros who were betting here, who don't see Kamala Harris as viable.
She is sort of bound to the whole, approving the ticket thing and not running against Joe Biden without Biden stepping out of the way. Newsom, maybe not.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue on and let's see what other there are probably some other stories. I don't know.
Well,
which
there
one
are
we're going to go with
a lot
next.
about politics and Biden's standing, which I think are kind of interesting.
Standing.
Let's start with this one. I don't know if I sent it to you, so let me send it to you now.
Do you keep track
this
of what
is Thomas Edsall. Title of his article, The Biden-Trump Rematch, is already here.
All right, I'll see. Well, I'll look at the bottom. You probably already put it there. Okay.
One of the most significant developments in the run-up to the 2024 presidential elections emerged largely under the radar. From 2016 to 2022, the number of white people without college degrees, Donald Trump's core, has fallen by 2.1 million.
And they can't get up.
Over the same period, the number of white people who have graduated from college, an increasingly Democratic constituency, has grown by 13.3 million.
All right. One of my kids is in there.
These trends do not bode well for the prospects of Republican candidates, especially Trump. Biden won whites with college degrees 51-48 in 2020, but Trump won by a landslide 67-32 among whites without degrees. And even so, there's new data that reflects Trump's ongoing and disruptive quest for power.
Yeah. In
a paper published last year, Donald Trump and the Lie, Kevin, Arsenault and Rory Truex, political scientists at Sciences Po Paris and Princeton, analyzed 40 days of polling conducted intermittently over the crucial period in Waukesha County. This is national. From October 27, 2020 through January 29, 2021. In other words, the 3 or 4 months just prior to the election when polling is likely to be accurate.
Okay.
Unlike what we see now. The authors found that Trump's false claim that the 2020 election was stolen from him had continuing ramifications. Here's the quote: "The lie is pervasive and sticky. The number of Republicans and independents saying they believe the election was fraudulent is substantial, and this proportion did not change appreciably over time or shift the important political developments. Belief in the lie may have buoyed some of Trump supporters' self-esteem." In other words, if they picked him and he lost, it must be because we were cheated.
Yeah, sure.
It's the only way I can justify to myself that I didn't make a mistake by picking him.
All right. That's one theory of it.
It's why when somebody is defrauded, it's really difficult to convince them sometimes, at least in the beginning, that they were taken to the cleaners. Well, I lost a 3-card monte, but I really watched the guy, so it was an honest game.
Yeah, I guess so. The more obvious
wasn't my fault.
The fraud in hindsight, maybe then the more embarrassed they are to admit that they fell for it.
Exactly right. In reaction to the lie, the authors write, "There's a significant rise in support for violent political activism among Democrats, which only waned after efforts to overturn the election failed." Mm-hmm. Endorsement of the lie pays off for Republicans. Republican voters reward politicians who perpetuate the lie, giving Republican candidates an incentive to continue to do so in the next election cycle. Now, these trends are among the most striking developments setting the stage for 2024. Among the additional conditions working to the advantage of Democrats are the increase in Democratic Party loyalty, the political mobilization of liberal constituents by adverse Supreme Court rulings, which is going to be bigger all the time because there's more and more adverse Supreme Court rulings to mobilize people over, not just Dobbs.
True. Right.
An initial edge in the fight for an electoral college majority and the increase in non-religious voters, along with the decline in church-going believers.
All right. So setting up well demographically, I guess.
So it was a close election that Biden won, but on the other hand, there's every reason to think Biden will win again. These and other factors have prompted 2 Democratic strategists, Linda Lake and Mike Lux, to declare all the elements are in place for a big Democratic victory in 2024. Oh, Simon Rosenberg isn't the only hopium person. Look at that.
How do you know?
Okay. Democrats could win a trifecta in 2024. A May 9th memo released to the public, the 2 even voiced optimism over the biggest hurdle facing Democrats, which is retaining control of the Senate, when as many as 8 Democratic-held seats are competitive while the Republican seats are in solidly red states. Republican advantages include high rates of crime, although modestly declining in 2023 and actually much lower than it used to be like 10 years ago. Right. Homelessness and dysfunction in cities run by Democrats, a parents' right movement, the Moms for Liberty, AstroTurf stuff.
Right.
And declining public support for gay rights and especially trans rights. These are, needless to say, a host of uncertainties. One key factor will be the salience on Election Day of issues closely linked to race, school integration, affordable housing, end of affirmative action, crime, urban disorder, and government spending on social programs. As a general rule, the higher these issues rank in voters' priorities, the better Republicans do. But in that respect, the success of conservatives in barring the use of race in college admissions has taken a Republican issue off the table. Same thing with Dobbs. We're running against this issue, but okay, we got what we wanted. The dog caught the car. Now what?
Right. And as it turns out, no one wanted a car.
Right. Francis Lee, political scientist at Princeton, noted in an email that in the sour environment of today's politics, many voters may be tempted toward a protest vote, and it's likely there will be some options available. It's not clear what no labels will do, but there might be others. And asked what factors he would cite as crucial to determining the outcome of the 2024 election, Ray LaRaja, political scientist at University of Massachusetts Amherst, pointed out by email that the economy is the source of most uncertainty. Will things continue to improve? Will Biden start to get credit, especially important, for white working class voters in Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. And in that regard, the Wall Street Journal and others are running stories about how, well, it may look bad in the economy for now, but Wall Street is actually very optimistic about the economy. In effect, they've stopped predicting recessions. It's the recession that never came.
Okay.
Right. And so will the way that Wall Street people look at the economy translate to votes? Here's the article summing that up in Politico. Voters don't like Bidenomics. Markets, on the other hand, are coming around. Leading economists at big banks like Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan Chase have lowered their odds of an imminent recession. This is the recession that everybody predicted that never came.
Yeah.
And Simon Rosenberg and others said, this is stupid. You keep saying recession. We're not in a recession. People think we are because you keep saying it. It's not true. Stop saying it.
Okay.
And now they're stopping, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. Good. I mean,
the most anticipated recession in modern history may not come, Jamie Cox, a managing partner at the advisory firm Harris Financial Group, said in an interview. The job market has started to soften without pushing up unemployment, Goldman's chief U.S. economist David Mericle said. Right? Okay. If we don't get into a recession, it'll be a miracle, he said. On the Pods podcast, there's also growing confidence that the pressure banks felt following the failures of several regional lenders won't cause recessionary shock. I continue to believe there's a path to reducing inflation while maintaining a healthy labor market, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said. Without downplaying significant risks ahead, the evidence we've seen so far suggests we are on that path.
All right.
So Americans have given the president dismal marks, and that reflects lingering frustration with elevated consumer prices. The personal consumption index, the central bank's preferred inflation gauge, showed prices climbed in May by 3.8%, slowest annual rate since April 2021, but well above the 2% target. On the other hand, we talked last week about the fact that the so-called misery index is actually lower than it's been in years and years and years for presidents trying to run for election.
Well, all right. Maybe it has something to do with the significant investments in pretty much everything that were made early on, which economists urged be undertaken so that we wouldn't head into a recession, and then they worked. Oh, my God.
Right. Even if the unemployment rate went up a few tenths of a percent from here, the labor market would still be in very good shape relative to history. Scott Wren, a senior global market strategist at Wells Fargo, wrote in a research note, U.S. consumers with money in their pockets tend to go out and spend it. And, of course, this Friday is Jobs Friday.
Oh.
So we'll see what happens with payrolls and unemployment. But, if it's a strong jobs market and inflation is dropping, that is simply a terrific place to be. So Biden's going to run on that and label it Bidenomics.
All right.
And at the same time, the Republicans say, he's doing our messaging for us. Bidenomics. Stagflation, terrible prices, everything is awful, but messaging is only as good as the message. And, if inflation remains lower and the job market remains strong and Wall Street starts saying, hey, we're in pretty good shape, that's what people will hear a whole lot more than Republican messaging.
Okay. Hear this. I got gas for $1.74 a gallon. So
yeah, when's the last time that happened?
All right. Not since the misery index was much higher.
Right. So Alan Abramowitz, a political scientist at Emory, documents growing Democratic unity.
That sounds good.
As a result of these trends toward intra-party consensus, there's been a steady drop in the percentage of Democratic defections to the opposition.
All right.
The party's voters have become less vulnerable to wedge issue tactics, especially wedge issues closely tied to race. Right? You can imagine, like, Republicans are going to South Carolina in the Democratic Party and tell them that, race is terrible and race relations are bad, and they're trying to screw you out of everything by giving stuff to other people.
Uh-huh.
How's that going to play in South Carolina with Democrats?
Oh, well, I understand it will now play poorly.
Well, it was always going to play poorly there because the Democratic Party is very heavily black, Southern,
Yes.
semi-conservative voters.
Right.
But there's a lot of the Democratic Party that's like that, and on the whole, a lot of the Democratic Party has basically adopted the James Clyburn view of how things are.
Oh.
And
Right.
as a result, you don't get a Ted Kennedy running against Jimmy Carter.
Okay. Well, you get an RFK instead.
Yeah, well, that's the point. He's not going to
RFK
do well,
Jr. Yeah, probably not.
right? There's nothing there for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then Edsall goes on to say three Supreme Court decisions handed down in the last week of June, rejecting the Biden administration's program to forgive student loan debt, which, by the way, he hadn't announced Plan B, even though it may not be going anywhere, but the announcement was good politics.
Yeah.
Affirming the right of a web designer to refuse to construct wedding websites for same-sex couples, which, again, is arguably something Democrats can use to not only mobilize the base, but fight people like Ron DeSantis, and ruling unconstitutional the use of race by colleges are in turn quite likely to increase Democratic turnout more than Republican turnout on Election Day.
Yes.
So once again, the Republicans may be sorry that the dog caught the car.
Yeah.
Right?
But that's
Politically,
what they
one
do
of the
with
most
these
effective
cars.
tools for mobilizing voters is to emphasize lost rights and resources. Dobbs v. Jackson, Women's Health Organization, is a great example. My Times colleague, Jonathan Weissman, argued in a July 1st article, Supreme Court decisions in education could offer Democrats an opening, and in addition, Republicans' remarkable successes before the new court may actually have deprived them of combative issues to galvanize voters going into 2024. And the education trends favoring Democrats are reinforced by Americans' changing religious beliefs. And this is PRRI polling found the white evangelical Protestant share of the population fell from 23% to 13.9% between 2006 to 2022. That's a big drop.
Yeah. But from where?
And over the same period, the non-religious share of the population rose from 16 to 26.8. Ryan Burge, political scientist at Eastern Illinois University, who I often quote, found that the non-religious can be broken down into three groups: atheists, who were Democratic, 85-11 for Biden; agnostics, 78-18 for Biden; and nothing in particular, the nuns, N-O-N-E-S,
Right. Yeah.
63-35 for Biden.
Okay.
Right, and then the last of the pro-Democratic developments is an initial advantage in electoral college votes, according to Kyle Condict at Larry Sabato's Crystal Ball. We're starting 260 electoral votes worth of states as leaning Democratic and 235 as Republican, 43 toss-ups. And if this prediction holds true until November, the Democratic candidate would need to win 20 more electoral college votes, so the Republican needs to win 35. So that's the election comes down to 11 to just a handful of states: Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, along with Nevada, which has voted Democratic in each of the last four presidential elections, but by closer margins each time. And in Arizona, domestic migration from California to Arizona is substantial enough to help shift the state from red to purple.
Okay.
And so all of these trends actually favor Democrats. So
Right, awesome.
Biden won the last election. Everybody's expecting this election to be the last election. It's never the same. But if anything, the trends favor Democrats. And, I think that needs to be emphasized because that's not always obvious.
Yes. Okay. By the way, I missed that. I heard the optimistic news, but where was migration changing from red to purple?
From California to Arizona.
Arizona. Okay. From California to the New York Islands, but by way of Arizona. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you got to stop somewhere on the way.
Yeah, right. Well,
It's
that's
a long
for
walk from
natural
California
first
to
stop.
New York Island.
Sure, right. I mean, I don't know. That
Woody
guy
did it,
roamed
but, that
around.
was a long time ago, and it took him a while.
That's right. Yes, it's
Yeah,
it's a
Dinah Arizona, while he
long-term
was walking.
project. Okay. Well, I was just okay. I wanted to make sure which state is it that we're talking about. That's
Arizona.
keeping an eye on it. All right. Yeah. I can see that.
Now,
handed
two
over the
background
governor's
pieces
office.
for other things to watch and try to understand and incorporate into what you're seeing, which can be somewhat misleading, so don't be fooled by it.
I'm ready to be misled.
The first one is from the Wall Street Journal. Why
Already
Biden goes
feeling
silent at some key moments. On the mutiny in Russia, Trump's indictment, and at moments during debt limit talks, the voluble president has been very quiet. And this is presented in a number of ways. First of all, it's unusual for Biden. They're so used to saying Biden's the guy that puts his foot in his mouth all the time. I can't believe he was quiet and didn't give us stuff during these big events. And the other is that this is planned. William Galston, former aide to President Bill Clinton, said that Biden knows the dangers of a poorly thought out remark. I'm reminded of George H.W. Bush, the elder Bush, refusal to dance verbally on the demise of the Soviet Union. German reunification would have been a lot harder to achieve without his verbal self-discipline.
Okay.
So for policy, sometimes it's better to be quiet and let things work themselves out.
Sure.
This can also be true with politics. But sometimes you need to be aggressive about pointing out where they screwed up. You know, the old James Carville, if your opponent is drowning, throw him an anchor.
Right.
Sometimes you do the Napoleon thing and say, don't interfere when your opponent is making a big mistake. And sometimes you do the Carville thing and say, let's highlight that mistake so everybody knows it's a mistake.
Yeah.
And it's a judgment as to which one is better.
Yes.
Biden has taken the approach of let's just be quiet about it and let it play out. More times than not, that works out for policy. Sometimes it works out for politics. Sometimes it doesn't.
Yes, and politics.
Let me give you an
use a
example,
proxy
concrete
too.
example
All
to
right.
this concept here. Washington Post has a story. Biden faces renewed pressure to embrace Supreme Court overhaul. Bombshell decisions have intensified liberal calls for Biden to urge a revamp of the court as he heads toward 2024. So far, he's resisting, says the story. And when you read the story, there's not much beyond the headline that this tells us. But let's go back to the other point. Do you think, David Waldman,
Me. Yes. All right.
political analyst and advisor, that it's better to get reelected and then deal with the court, or to talk about the court first to try to get reelected?
It's a good question. I think, politics allows you, particularly presidential politics, affords you the luxury of having proxies do a lot of your work for you. So you can go around
So you're saying, why not both?
said.
The little girl with the meme there.
Sure. So certainly if you, I mean, it really depends. I guess here's where your pollsters help you out. You know, how much, at what point do we do better by
which states?
Rallying the troops, and where do we have to do that? And I can't be on record as saying both, but someone else can say, well, maybe we need to take a look at these things. But generally speaking, probably as president, the traditional play, certainly. I mean, I guess we don't have enough data to know whether it's smarter.
My position is very clear. The court was wrong, and I oppose it.
Right, and what you're gonna do about it. Yeah, usually I would say probably stuff like that. It's better to
can't do anything until
play
you
it
give
close
me
to the
a
vest.
Democratic Senate and House.
Yeah, well, that's true too.
So I'm not talking about it until you do those things. Then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, generally speaking,
Biden has a
appreciate
reasonable
the
argument to
silence
say
on
that's a
things.
better approach.
Yeah. Yes, and it has been. I mean, you know, there's always the issue of, well, you really don't know that much about how effective the other route could be because no one ever tries it. But then again, it's not necessarily that no one ever tries it. It's just they never get here unless they refrain from trying it. And then,
I'm stepping back and thinking, you know, if this were, 2016, 2020, and Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders took a very aggressive approach about what to do about the Supreme Court, which, one could easily construct a what if. I don't think they do especially well with it.
If we're talking about a
So
situation where
if you're
they're
talking
the
about,
nominee,
nobody ever takes that route. Well, some people have tried taking that route.
Yes,
They don't win.
But yeah, I mean, I've never seen the nominee or presumptive nominee.
Yeah, that's the point. You don't see the winning nominee doing that, but
Right.
maybe that's why they were the winning nominee.
Right. You can't tell exactly, but I mean, in this case, it's also fair to say, I think probably at least Bernie Sanders probably has this understanding, and Elizabeth Warren may have also come to this understanding, as losing primary candidates. They were essentially, in the long run, acting as those proxies. Well, we'll be the ones to say this stuff. We're in a position where only a long shot gets us to the nomination. And this is the long shot, so let's take it. So personally, sure, why not? It might work. But as far as their position with the Democratic Party or the broader Democratic caucus in the Senate, what have you, when you're speaking about Bernie Sanders, they also realize, well, there may be a long-term advantage to the Democratic team here by my voicing this opinion, getting the idea out there, building support for it, and not forcing the guy who's probably going to be the standard bearer to carry that with him, even
Absolutely.
if he agrees.
And I am totally on board with that, and apparently Tom Edsall is too.
Oh, all right.
The point is that with a more united Democratic Party, you can do stuff like that.
Yes.
And it's not immediately divisive. Mm-hmm. It's not Ted Kennedy versus, Jimmy Carter to bring that stuff up.
Yeah.
And it's not even Obama Hillary to bring it up. It's not divisive to have this sort of idea get floated by part of the party, because the moderates in the party understand that when push comes to shove and you have to pass legislation like the Infrastructure Act and the other pieces that Biden actually got done, both sides of the party will come together and do what needs to be done. And with that trust in mind, you can have part of the party say stuff that the nominee necessarily wouldn't or can't say. But at the same time, you can't expect Biden to position himself prior to the election on this stuff. Not going to happen.
Not if there's no demonstrable good reason for it.
Yeah, I mean, basically some advisor will come and say, oh, you're going to come out and say, pack the Supreme Court? That's politically brave, Mr. President. And if anybody's ever watched Yes, Minister, where whenever the permanent secretary, which is to say the civil service, wants the politically elected minister to not do something, all they have to do is whisper in his ear, oh, you're going to take that position? Well, that's politically brave. And immediately the minister will pull back and say, what?
Nope.
What do you
don't
mean?
Want that.
Why are you saying that? I don't want to be politically brave.
I
don't want to be first. I don't want to be out there.
The end.
I want to do something politically popular where no one will notice.
Yeah, well, I mean, I understand his position, certainly, and I mean, regardless of what I think the strategic value of it is, I've come to expect that incumbent presidents, Democratic presidents anyway, they don't put themselves way out on limbs for anything, even when it's kind of obvious that that's where the body of the party has gone.
Sure, Obama and gay marriage.
Yeah. That's one, yeah. Obama and arresting Republican malfeasors and predecessors. He's. I notice he's changed his mind on what to do about past crimes by Republican presidents now that it's not on him. That happens to have registered with me personally. But yes, a number of issues like that. It's not where presidents go. It's
and again, they want to bring the entire party with them, not just one wing of the party. So I'm not saying Biden is being a political genius. I'm just saying it, sort of makes sense why he's taking the approach that he is. And I wouldn't expect Biden to push for an expanded Supreme Court anytime soon. It's not his natural instincts. The first thing he's going to think of in terms of his natural instincts is, well, how would the Senate deal with that proposal? And that's going to hold him back. And you got to overcome that before you get anywhere. So I understand Biden's initial reluctance, but in terms of whether it's good politics, you're right. It's better to have other people suggest it and Biden say, look, my position is clear. I oppose what they've done. It's wrong. come out and vote and help us fix things.
Yeah.
And be vague about it.
Right. While at the same time possibly running the I agree with you, now make me do it play.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing entirely.
Yes. But it could be what's afoot, right?
Meanwhile,
I mean, how does it look different?
Speaking of throwing them in anchor, here's something you can't throw them in anchor on.
Okay.
This is from the New York Times. Republicans are divided on impeaching Biden as panel begins new inquiry. A vote to send the Homeland Security Committee impeachment articles against Biden for his border policies has underscored rifts in the GOP about whether to try to remove him and for what. Neither pursuit appears, that is to say, Alejandro Mayorkas or Biden impeachment. Neither pursuit appears to have the votes to proceed, and many Republicans are worried that without a stronger case against President, even trying the move could be disastrous for their party.
Yes. Gosh, I hope so.
Please proceed.
Yeah.
Several rank-and-file Republicans from politically competitive districts have balked at the idea, even after McCarthy endorsed the push. Few believe that the new investigation of Mr. Biden will yield anything that could persuade them to oust him. So again, a reminder, McCarthy's completely beholden to Trump and will do what Trump tells him. But these Biden district Republicans have no interest in this. It's not going anywhere. And, the headline could well have been a surprising number of Republicans really are pursuing idiocy.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, but then what do you read that story? I'm not certain if it stands out enough.
Even among Republicans who support removing Mr. Biden, there's deep skepticism about whether focusing on his border policies is the best place to build an impeachment case.
Yes, that too.
That's a side issue. It's not the main issue here, said Representative Carlos Jimenez, Republican of Florida and a member of the Homeland Security panel. You should be looking at Hunter Biden, son.
Did he actually say that?
The president
I'm not sure
really
whether
is
that's a
going to have
joke
the
or not.
majority of his problems.
Yeah.
But that panel
and they're looking at that
found
too.
any evidence of wrongdoing by Mr. Biden despite months of scrutiny. I mean, these people are nuts. You have to understand. They're crazy. They live in a different world.
Yeah.
They actually believe Fox News, which is really dangerous.
Well, yeah, that's certainly the problem. And they have their own version of hopium, right? Well, we feel that we only lost the election because it was stolen from us, and so
And if
we
you only
need
look
to...
hard enough and clap loud enough, Tinkerbell will live.
Right. So they couldn't prove the stolen election thing, and they couldn't prove this or that or the Hunter Biden thing, and so they say, well, we'll impeach the president. We'll reverse the election that way, and it's an understandable feeling. I mean, I certainly felt it about Trump, but then he obliged by doing impeachable things. So, whatever. We'll continue tomorrow if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Okay, terrific. We're in agreement. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's start our second hour today, this Wednesday that feels like a Monday. I'll jump back to one of the initial comments from the opening of the show. It was, of course, our semi-annual celebratory gunfire does fall back to the ground, so watch out day. And the other day being, of course, New Year's Eve. So it happens, really once about every 6 months or so. So July 4th and New Year's Eve, just those are the times when, despite all the pleading, and there is annually pleading from local police departments not to engage in celebratory gunfire. But as it turns out, it is the segment of the population least likely to be interested in listening to the police who are doing the most celebratory gun firing. Although I guess it is possible. I could still imagine a demographic of people who, let's say, blue stripe flag car decal people caught in releasing celebratory gunfire. I could see that being the case, but I'm not certain. That's just a guess. Anyway, what's not a guess is that just as always, this happens despite all the police pleas for rationality, and already the headlines are beginning to roll in. Let's see, there's just a quick Google search for celebratory gunfire in the news section tells me that in KCTV, Kansas City, Missouri, person shot in leg in KCMO, as they put it there, due to possible celebratory gunfire. There's incident number one. CBS 17 reporting 3 Raleigh, North Carolina homes hit by suspected celebratory gunfire on 4th of July, police say. And lastly, what's last in the list of what's currently being reported, it usually takes a couple of days for all of these stories to come out. Sources say boy shot in a Texas apartment, possibly hit by celebratory gunfire. So, yes, those bullets do come down. They hit something. If they fall harmlessly to earth, well, you're lucky. But the earth in most places where celebratory gunfire is frequently a newsworthy event, the earth is often covered in people, cars, houses, and other objects of value that they didn't want to be punched full of holes, and you should do your best to refrain from celebratory gunfire. So, anyway, that's out there, and probably that list of stories will grow by the hour as they make their way through the local reporting networks and onto the national networks and into Google searches, etc. So if you want, keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, I do have an interesting gun story that I just thought I would bring you up to date on, even though there are many other stories that we really should be getting to. But what can I tell you? This one really grabbed my interest over the weekend. A Republican wingnut Twitter account from, I forget who, I'll have to look it up, from the Heritage Foundation. Though, this is the, here we go, I'm finding it now because the Mastodon response to it that I put up is thankfully still getting lots of response and people are still passing it around. So here it is. Amy Swearer, I mean, it's spelled like Swearer, I don't know how she pronounces it, but she looks like the kind of person who, may have a swear jar, but so it's an ironic last name. But Amy Swearer is from the Heritage Foundation, and I guess her particular beat is liberals are all wrong about guns, which is a popular beat over there at the Heritage Foundation. And I guess she seized upon this story and is entirely convinced of her rightness in it. I'm not so sure. This she was saying a couple of days ago, because she was very angry. She was tearing her hair out that more of the mainstream press was not noticing this thing and heralding it as nationally important. But that's just, in this sense, we have the same frustration. She's shocked and appalled that a story like this would remain a local story, whereas I'm shocked and appalled that it always remains a local story when a 3-year-old finds a gun and shoots his mom or something like that. It sometimes makes a splash in the national news, but rarely and for a very brief moment in time. There really needs to be some more spectacular aspect to it, like it should take place in a Walmart or whatever. I mean, just the other day, we had the 2-year-old who shot his pregnant mom and killed mom and the baby as well. And, we're over it. Nobody's talking about it anymore. But she has the same frustration from the other side. Why aren't more people talking about this story? On June 27th, she was tearing her hair out that this thing had happened, I think, 4 days prior, and no one was noticing. And she's angry and tweeting, "It's indisputable," and it's almost never indisputable, certainly not when a Heritage Foundation person says so. "It's indisputable that an armed civilian stopped an active shooter last week. You lowly worm, almost certainly haven't heard about it. Why? Because Las Vegas police have gone out of their way to downplay it, while the media have shown basically zero interest." And she follows with the whole thread on this story. Now, what happened here, to give you the very basics, is that a person, actually a resident, I think, of a fashionable high-rise apartment complex in Las Vegas, not on the Strip or anything, a few miles, or not a few miles, I think a 10-minute walk, they said, from the Strip. Very, hot location and a very nice, apparently, luxury apartment complex. Turnberry Towers, if you're from the area, and you can tell us whether you think it's deserves the label of luxury high-rise. Anyway, a guy showed up with a assault rifle, initially described as an AR-15 style rifle, and you can see why. if you take a look at the photos accompanying everything. And I think he's a resident there. It's not entirely clear, but, as is always the case with these shootings, there are various gray areas that only get filled in after a number of days, and sometimes contradictory reporting even over those few days. But anyway, I think the initial reporting was that he was known to sometimes stay there, which might mean he's a resident there and he's there all the time. And the people who spot him there are a little bit unsure about how frequently they see him. And maybe, people who sometimes live in an luxury apartment complex will be people who, spend part of their time in Palm Springs and part of their time in Vegas. It's not entirely clear where they live, their chief domicile, whatever. I don't know. Anyway, the point is he was recognized as somebody who would normally be on site. So his presence alone did not raise any particular alarm. But what did raise the alarm was that he showed up with an AR-15. Now, as Amy Swearer would have it, this man came to the building with the intent of perpetrating a mass shooting in the building, from the building, out into the strip. I don't know exactly what the plan was. Neither does she. Doesn't matter. He's obviously coming here to do a mass shooting. How do you know that? Because he takes a shot at the front desk personnel. Now, what ends up happening is the front desk personnel actually shoot back and injured him. They didn't kill him. And so, as Amy would have it, this is indisputable evidence that an armed civilian stopped a mass shooting, which is the holy grail of gun rights advocates. They're always saying that this happens all the time, but they have great difficulty ever finding real examples of it. And so when they find an example of it that they think is real, they are very angry if the entire country isn't on the same page with them. But the problem is that it's actually fairly disputable that that's what happened. So I'll give you a couple of reasons why. First of all, I'll read you a couple of articles about it, and you can decide what's going on here. First, we'll start with the Fox News article on it that is essentially covering Republican or conservative frustration with their narrative not being universally adopted. Fox News reports it this way. Armed Las Vegas worker stopped likely mass shooter in his tracks, but received little attention, says an expert. I don't even know if it's necessarily the same expert. They may have just found another expert to also complain about this thing. A suspect in Las Vegas was seen in an apartment complex wearing a helmet and carrying an AR-15 style rifle, says the subheader. This is Emma Colton reporting for Fox News. A gunman wearing a helmet and carrying an AR-15 style rifle was caught on camera at the entrance of an upscale Las Vegas apartment complex before an armed employee of the building opened fire and stopped him in his tracks. So you're already beginning to see the dissolution of the, armed civilian stopped the mass shooter. Definitely a mass shooter. Maybe he was just coming to shoot the front desk people. It's not great either way. You don't want him shooting people. That's definitely a problem. But there you have it. Right up in the first paragraph, it's an armed employee of the apartment complex. A little different from random armed civilian passerby who happened to be armed because he's armed every day for personal self-protection and the protection of others, and good guy with a gun stepped in. Good guy with a gun stepped in, but it was a good guy who you hired and told, sit here with a gun in case we need a good guy with a gun. I mean, I think there's kind of general agreement on the idea of perhaps armed guards posing a deterrent of some kind to mass shooters. I think we're all kind of in agreement with that, even though it's sad to think that in that sense, the solution is more guns, but there's not that much disagreement about armed guards. There's a disagreement about how much it costs to place them and who should bear those costs and how realistic it is, etc. And isn't it a sad situation? Yes, but armed guards versus random person on the street, it's a big difference. Okay, so he was stopped by an armed employee of the building who opened fire and stopped him in his tracks, although there's some discussion to be had about what his tracks were. We'll leave that for later. Questions on how the incident played out remained unanswered for days, as media coverage was minimal despite the worker having foiled what appeared to be a mass shooting attempt. Heritage Foundation senior legal fellow Amy Swearer claimed. So it is the same expert, quote-unquote expert. Normally, when you have some sort of video like this, especially when it appears to be an active shooting situation, that's something that makes national news. I've never seen that not pick up steam of some sort, Swearer told Fox News Digital. Okay. What's bizarre here is the hand waving. Nothing to see here. Move along, folks, Swearer continued. But of course, as I just told you, there's plenty of hand waving about massacres that actually did happen at July 4th parades. And we've forgotten a year down the road, so it's not that ridiculous to think, well, you know, sometimes people just don't pay attention to things. There's lots of hand waving from people like Amy Swearer when a 2-year-old shoots their mom. You know, the gun should have been secured, yes, but that doesn't mean anything, blah, blah, blah. 2-year-olds can't pull the trigger. Okay, they do all the time, never mind. Blah, blah, blah. That doesn't mean anything. Plenty of hand waving to go around, no doubt about that. So, now, I guess what's not displayed here anywhere, and it's the video is surveillance video from the building, and it's not that easy to find, although I did see at least one bird site account that had what purported to be that security video. And when I say we were going to get back to what his, stopped in his tracks, what were his tracks, and it's undisputed that he stopped a mass shooting, well, like I say, it's pretty disputable because the video shows, and we haven't even gotten to the main part of the story yet. I actually should probably do that. But a long story short, because this will be covered, I'm sure, even in the Fox News, they'll have to acknowledge this. The guy comes and he fires one shot from this rifle. And by the way, shattering plate glass again, shooting through sliding doors and apartment buildings, more of the poor glass we've had to report being massacred on this show. He fires one shot, and then his awesome AR-15 military-style weapon jams, and he can't fix it, and he can't get another shot off. He raises the rifle at somebody else, I guess, and attempts to take a second shot and appears to pull the trigger, but can't do it because the gun's jammed. Now, you might say that the gun jamming is what stopped the mass shooting, if there was a mass shooting in the offing here. He may just have been there to shoot one or two people. We don't know. But the gun jams. Not only does the gun jam, but if you can see the video, if you find some, and I can point you to a Twitter account that has got the video if you want to examine it. At some point, he decides, this clearly isn't going to work. I can't get this gun fixed. I got to get the hell out of here. And he turns around and he goes out. He's leaving the building. So when you're talking about stopping a mass shooter in his tracks were out the door. I'm out of here. I'm leaving. The employee who shoots him in the back several times on his way out the door, which, given that the suspicion of what this guy had in mind, you'll still find that I think a majority of people will be like, okay, he shot him in the back. You know what? I'm kind of okay with that because it's not like the mass shooter was going to be super honorable and only kill people who, stood the chance of putting up a good fight. He'd shoot plenty of people in the back. He doesn't care. If that's what he is, and, there's still some doubt about exactly what he was up to. But there you have it. It was stopped by not a civilian, but an armed guard. And it was stopped mostly by the fact that his gun jammed, and he even stopped it himself. He said, "Man, that my gun is jammed, I'm getting the hell out of here." But they decided they weren't going to let him escape, and maybe that's not such a bad idea, and shot him in the back, and then held him at gunpoint for the police to collect. So, that's okay with me, but it's a part of the story. Now, it also may be why the video isn't that interesting. It's not an armed civilian popping up out of nowhere and bullseyeing a guy who's in the middle of a massacre and leaving no question whatsoever about the circumstances. It's all quite weird and gray. So it's just not, I don't know. It's not catching on maybe for that reason. Anyway, the rest of the Fox reporting here is about 3:15 p.m. on Friday, June 23rd. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department received a call regarding a shooting at Turnberry Towers, Las Vegas, which is located about a 10-minute walk from the Strip. The suspect, identified as Andrew Warrender, walked toward the main lobby of the apartment complex at 3:13 p.m. They got all the specifics here. According to the arrest report citing surveillance footage, and allegedly shot his weapon at an employee. And if you read enough reporting, it's a little unclear what he was shooting at exactly, because he was behind the plate glass. But I could see that. Allegedly shot his weapon at an employee. He attempted to fire another shot, but appeared to have a malfunction. The gun did, not him. I mean, he had already had his malfunction. He was there with a gun. He aimed his weapon again at the employee, but no bullet was discharged. Warrender then walked toward the front entrance to leave the apartment complex, but was shot by the employee. And now, to clear things up, there are 2 employees present. And we'll get to some of those because they're important to what's going on. The employee held Warrender at gunpoint with his Smith & Wesson 9mm handgun. Very technical, and everyone wants to know what kind of gun he had, until police arrived, saying he felt everyone's life in the area was in danger and he used deadly force to protect innocent citizens. Well, okay. Information on the case, however, was scarce between June 23rd until June 28th. There were bare-bones news articles immediately after it happened, reporting that 2 people were involved in the shooting and the public was not in immediate danger. But apparently Fox and Amy Swearer are outraged by the fact that there weren't complete details immediately. This is the normal development, certainly of any shootings that I've seen. And even more to the point, it's really kind of the way news reports go about everything. They don't know what the hell's going on. And they're not sure, and things are complicated, and every once in a while, it takes them a couple of days to figure it out, and it's reflected in the news reporting. A couple of local outlets that reported a, quote, hero employee thwarted the suspect, relied on witness testimony as police didn't confirm the details, because they were investigating. The police department additionally did not confirm to the Daily Signal on June 27th if a, quote, hero with a gun thwarted the shooting. They weren't sure. And they aren't in the business of simply confirming conservative news outlets' narratives about things. Usually they are, but this time they weren't. And now they're very angry with the Las Vegas police. I can understand why there's not this immediate asking of questions. It's just sort of move along. But the question becomes, why are the police framing it that way? Swearer said. And maybe they don't know, but it seems pretty clear that by the next day, when you see this video start coming out, it seems very clear that there's something else going on here. And, of course, she has a point. It's just not the point that she thinks. It's video of the guy saying, yes, excuse me, I actually did that myself for one time. But I'm out of here. I usually go with the F on that one. That's landmark day. All right. Well, there'll be a lot of fans of that one. Gilly, you'll be happy about that. But he says, I'm done with this. I'm out of here. And then he's shot. I mean, that's a less than a clear picture. And you can see why people are trying to figure out exactly what's going on. Anyway, she's not done complaining. And even with these follow-up stories, even with the media itself, you still have this framing of, oh, well, he just stopped it. A hero employee who did this hero thing that we're not going to go into detail about, Swearer said. And I think as the details become clearer and they really nail down the story, there'll be a lot more room for that. This is not out of keeping with the normal news cycle. Anyway, Swearer said the video of Warrender that is circulated online has the earmarks of an intended mass shooting. It really doesn't. It has the opposite. It remains unclear what the shooter's motives or intentions were. Generally speaking, when you have somebody in a public space with a rifle who just begins firing, not at a specific person, well, it was. He's just like firing into glass doors, she said. That has all the earmarks of someone who's bent on a serious form of violence against more than one person. Swearer said normally when video circulates of an individual in a public place holding a rifle, it makes national news, and it really doesn't. Unless the news is, look what they're doing. They're persecuting this person for their right to open carry. I've never seen that not pick up steam of some sort. And of course, it did pick up steam. And I said it shows the opposite, but I guess it's really not the case that it shows the opposite. I mean, the part about him leaving kind of shows that he's come to the conclusion that it's probably time to do the opposite. But anyway, I guess I would have to agree that somebody coming and shooting out the glass in the front door is, in fact, showing hallmarks of potential for serious violence. I'll take that back. Other cases where an armed citizen thwarted an active shooter, for example, have received widespread attention in the past, including last summer when Indiana man, what's his name? Elisha Dickin shot a mass shooter at a mall, preventing further loss of life. Everyone heard about that, right? I don't know. I don't remember it. Police confirmed a Good Samaritan thwarted the shooting just hours after it unfolded, and the story dominated the news headlines for days. What? That case did differ from Las Vegas, as 4 people, including the shooter, died. And, of course, nobody died in this one. On June 28th, local outlets and Fox News Digital were able to get more information on the case when police began releasing Warrender's arrest report. The report confirmed that an employee of Turnberry Towers who worked both security and deliveries shot Warrender and was not a suspect in the case. His name was redacted from the reports reviewed by Fox News Digital. The unidentified employee told police that about 2:50 on the day of the shooting. Now, there's more to this. They have expanded their reporting since then, and I maybe don't need to read as many other articles about it, which is fine. They're doing me a service here. This is terrific. But I did watch that Amy Swearer's position on this thing shifted just a little bit as it became clear. I mean, remember her initial tweet here is, "It is undisputed that an armed civilian made this stop." And it's immediately disputable that an armed civilian was the one who did this. It was an armed security guard. Now she's arguing, and I guess she's got grounds for it. Apparently this guy splits his time at Turnberry Towers. He's got 2 part-time jobs, I guess, there, or they use him in 2 different ways. One as a security guard and the other doing deliveries. I don't know whether they're deliveries for Turnberry Towers or their residents or what, but she's now latched onto that saying, well, you see, he's only part-time security. And it's alleged, she alleges that his job didn't require him to be armed. He's armed because he would be an armed citizen whether he was working security or not. He likes to go about armed and does so normally. But I think it probably, as with most people, it sort of dovetails with the fact that they're also a security guard. Why do you have the gun? Well, I'm a security guard. Why are you a security guard? Because I have a gun and I like to use it. That sometimes happens too. But the fact that he also does delivery, does that mean he's not an armed security guard? Not really. Just that doesn't seem to play out for me. Now, as I said, so all of this has been, I think, added to the Fox reporting since more detail came out. But the fact that they didn't initially have this and that now they do means more reporting needed to be done. That's why the story didn't have clarity as soon as Amy Swearer wanted it. The unidentified employee told police that about 2:50 on the day of the shooting, a valet employee of the hotel alerted him that Warrender was, quote, about to point a firearm at him. That's not a place that you don't have a lot of time. He's about to point a firearm at you. I'm not certain even what that means. I think they're together in the lobby, these two. Now, this is interesting. The armed security guard who thwarted the suspect, they're going with that story, even though Swearer needs them to say he's only a part-timer. The armed security guard who thwarted the suspect told police he is not asked to carry a firearm at work. Not that he's asked not to, but he's not asked to carry a firearm at work, but, quote, chooses to do so on his own free will. The employee had the Smith & Wesson in a holster on his waist with additional ammunition on his person, according to the report. I'm sure that they're like, well, we want you to be a security guard. But I mean, what this probably is they're like, we're hiring a security guard. No, we're not going to buy you a gun. If you have one, you're a preferred candidate for the job, but you don't have to have one, but we're not going to buy you one, but we're only going to hire somebody who's going to be armed here. So, do what you want to do. Anyway, police said the employee discharged 12 to 13 rounds at Warrender, causing him to fall down and drop the rifle. Not kill him. Didn't get a kill shot out of the 13 rounds. And we definitely saw the initial shots he missed. He also shot out some plate glass windows as well. But anyway, Warrender was ultimately arrested and transported to a nearby hospital for his wounds. The suspect was additionally known to employees at the apartment complex as he would frequently stay with his uncle who lived there. On the day of the shooting, employees noticed noted to police that Warrender was, quote, not acting like his normal self and, quote, had a blank stare when on the apartment's property. Investigators initially thought Warrender had injured his uncle prior to the shooting, but found an empty apartment upon investigation. They did find an empty black case in the master bedroom, which reportedly held the rifle. Now, we'll do a little bit more about this after our break, but what's really interesting here, and some of the other reporting makes a little clearer. We'll have to lay out exactly what the police report says happened and who reported what to whom and why the armed security guard / not armed security guard / delivery guy / who knows what didn't why he reacted in the way that he did. All right. In the meantime, we'll just read a little bit more from Fox News and head to the break. Swearer said in a Twitter thread on June 27th, before the arrest was reported, that it appeared that the police department wanted to downplay the crime as to not highlight that a good guy with a gun prevented a tragedy. She was very upset that it took 4 days to sort this pretty complicated situation out. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Yeah, all right, I'm going to continue with this crazy Las Vegas story because I do think that there's more to it. So, all right, that was the main Fox News coverage. There was a little bit more, but it's, I don't know, but more Amy Swearer complaining, I think. Saying, it's interesting, the exercise in framing that she is adopting, even though she's complaining about police framing here. 4 days, and LVPD apparently doesn't think it's important to clarify basic facts of an incident that would probably garner national attention. They'd prefer you just move along, folks, because what does it matter if a good guy with a gun saved lives, Swearer wrote. And then, of course, in the end, Warrender was charged with attempted murder, 2 counts of assault with the use of a deadly weapon, and illegally discharging a gun. But what's interesting, of course, is as the situation developed and things changed, Swearer had to revise her story, fall back to different positions, go with the, well, okay, maybe it wasn't an armed civilian, it was an armed security guard. But maybe it was only a part-time armed security guard, and maybe it wasn't a requirement of the job that he be armed, except wink, wink, it kind of was. But she had to, she hasn't given that ground yet, but she's shifting along the way, and it's like, that's why for the police, they don't have the luxury of really being able to have the ground shift under them like that and wave it away the same way you can if you're writing for the Heritage Foundation. Like, who cares if the Heritage Foundation gets the story wrong? It would be disinformation if they did, but it doesn't affect the underlying legal case, which is the serious thing here. And the police want to take time and get it right. And the fact that there isn't national news because nobody knows what the hell went on exactly, I think that kind of explains itself too. Anyway, so like I said, there are some other reports. Let's see, a couple of different news outlets there that covered it. Now, here's another Fox, but the local Fox affiliate in Las Vegas, the way they covered the thing on the developments by July 3rd, when they were reporting that the suspect in the shooting had yet to appear in court because they were undergoing medical treatment. Michael Bell filed this relatively short report for Fox 5 in Vegas, fox5vegas.com, saying the man suspected of opening fire inside the high-rise lobby on June 23rd was due in court on Monday but couldn't appear due to medical reasons. Andrew Warrender, 30, is charged with, we told you what the charges were. Defendant not transported due to medical reasons is what the court records show for his case on Monday morning. He's still being held without bond, so they haven't even had as much as an arraignment on it yet. But Amy Swearer wants, the news concluded and everything neatly bound up for her to present as a good guy with a gun framing to the country. And she's upset because she wants to be the first on the story, and she had the opportunity to do so because the Las Vegas Police Department was taking their time with things. She noticed it all the way from wherever, Washington, D.C., New York City. And, there was a gap in the reporting. She had it. So an opportunity to become famous as being the first person to break the news, even though, look, in Las Vegas, they knew all about it. It's just no one in New York or Washington, D.C. cared because it was just not a nationally interesting story generally. But she found an opportunity to make herself famous in it. All right. So there's really not much more about this except that Warrender is now expected to be back in court on July 18th for his preliminary hearing. But I just wanted to sort of show you, all right, well, here's what, local Fox affiliates, who arguably are controlled by a different group than Fox News Channel nationally, and certainly the Heritage Foundation, basically saying, it's really just not that big of a deal, quite honestly. So we're not even making it a splashy coverage thing. That's actually the bulk of the article. That's it. Now there's more. And each one of them has a little additional tidbit, I think, is why I put these things away. Here is the local NBC affiliate, 3newslv.com. Arrest report. Man who opened fire at Turnberry Towers shot by security guard after rifle malfunction. Okay, so we know the basics. This time they got the age, a different number. Andrew Warrender is reported as 32 in this one. That's, I don't know how these things happen, but they do happen. Mistakes are made in the initial reporting. That's just the way it is. This is a Wednesday, June 28th report. A couple of days. It's already, angry days for Amy Swearer. But as you can see, even the local reporters can't get the story straight entirely. Anyway, I thought this was of some interest. Some of you will be particularly angry about it, those of you named Karen. But the high-rise is on Karen Avenue. So, angry shooter on Karen Avenue. That's okay. We can all laugh at that. Investigators learned that Warrender brought an AR-15 style rifle to the complex, allegedly fired a round toward a security officer. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police wrote in their report, the rifle malfunctioned after one shot. Warrender tried to fix it. The security guard officer fired his gun, hitting Warrender several times. Let's see. Police determined that the rifle was a Stag 6.8. I don't know. I guess that's the maker, but with a casing stuck in the injection port in a partially chambered cartridge. Familiar problem. The security officer told detectives that a valet employee, remember this, came up to him and said Warrender was about to point a firearm at him, according to the arrest report. Warrender came into the front lobby wearing a helmet, holding a rifle, and the security officer heard a gunshot. He saw Warrender holding the rifle and fired 5 to 7 shots. But it took him a while. Detectives reviewed the surveillance video and saw Warrender walk down a staircase toward the main lobby. The video allegedly shows him firing one shot at someone who ducked down behind a front desk. Warrender appears to have a malfunction of the rifle and tries to fix it. He then places the rifle back onto his shoulder and again aims the rifle in the direction of the victim as he is crouched below the counter. Warrender's finger appears to press the trigger, but because the firearm malfunctioned, no bullet was discharged. The video shows Warrender walking toward the front entrance and leaving through a revolving door. Those doesn't look like a revolving door to me. Still holding the rifle. When he is shot by the security officer, police wrote, the officer holds Warrender at gunpoint until officers arrived on the scene. Warrender was taken to the hospital, booked in absentia on suspicion of attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. Police wrote that he underwent surgery, had to be sedated during his recovery, and thus couldn't speak with detectives. And let's see. It says here, this is the older article, that his next court hearing was scheduled for July 3rd. That didn't happen either. Witnesses who work at Turnberry Towers told police that Warrender often stayed at the complex. One person described him as socially awkward, but said that carrying a rifle was very out of the ordinary. Before the shots were fired, this person asked Warrender if he was okay, and Warrender replied that he was not okay. Well, okay, he's not okay. Another witness said Warrender was not behaving normally. This person said Warrender normally jokes with them, but he did not speak when he parked on Friday. The person said he did not see a rifle or helmet with Warrender when he arrived on the property. So that fills in a little more detail. Now, there's at least one other that has a little bit more detail. This one comes again from one of the local stations, I guess a different CBS outlet, I guess also affiliated with Las Vegas, though. 8 News now. Wasn't the other one also CBS? All right, maybe not. Anyway, shooter's AR-15 jammed during Turnberry Tower shooting. Okay, same stuff. Stephanie Overton is the reporter for this one. Now, let me see. I'll skim through. She, again, has his age as 32, so some question about whether he's 30 or 32. Let's see. All right, here's the detail that's of some interest. The report stated, police report, shortly after 3 p.m., a valet employee told a front desk security guard that Warrender had walked into the lobby carrying a rifle. Now, this is the part that's interesting and not reported elsewhere, and not, I guess, factored into Amy Swearer's reporting or thinking either. Valet employee tells security guard, hey, Warrender just walked into the lobby carrying a rifle. Security guard, the hero, the genius of the whole thing, the good guy with the gun, says the security guard told him, valet, that Warrender could carry an open carry rifle in Nevada. Sorry, it's an open carry state. What do you want me to do? A guy has a rifle. Big deal. So even the good guy with the gun, the security guard with the gun, voluntarily, his first reaction is, I carry a gun openly. I think anybody should be able to carry a gun openly. What do you want me to do? In other words, he says, call me when he starts shooting. So that's what he does. Good guy with a gun says, if the guy starts shooting, and I mean, I guess that's to be expected for gun rights advocates, right? He could be just open carrying. He's wearing a helmet. He says he's not okay. Well, basically, you're going to have to wait for him to start shooting at you. And when he does, let me know. So they did. And he did. And he shot. And guess what? They had to shoot him after all. That security guard told police that he had seen Warrender on an almost daily basis for the past year and a half and had never had any issues with him. Okay. I mean, you hope that the police would be so restrained sometimes in their responses, except in Colorado Springs, where when people call and say there's an armed guy walking up and down the street with an AR-15 and I'm afraid he's going to start shooting people, and they say, well, call us when he does. And he didn't have a malfunction. So that was bad. According to the report, the valet driver thought that something was off with Warrender and approached Warrender to ask if he was okay, to which Warrender replied that he was not okay. Remember that the other article was like, well, some person at the complex. As it turns out, it was one of the front desk people, the valet guy. He asked him, are you okay? The valet driver asked Warrender why he had a rifle with him. Warrender moved the rifle in a motion as if he was going to point it at him, the report stated. The valet driver then moved back to the front desk and told security guards to call the police. Except that security guards said, meh, what can I tell you? Unless he said, the guy has a rifle, and the security guard said, nothing I can do about him having a rifle. And then he went to talk to him and said, are you okay? And he said no, and went to point the rifle at him. And he didn't shoot him, thankfully, but he had the time to run back to the front desk and call the security guard again and say, well, now he's pointing it at me. Yeah, well, wait till he starts shooting. I told you to wait till he shoots. The valet driver moved back to the front desk, told the security guards to call the police. At 3:11 p.m., an HOA manager, Homeowners Association manager, told the police that she was notified by one of the security guards that a resident of the property was armed with a rifle. So now he's gotten alarmed enough to tell who? The police? No. The homeowners agency, homeowners association. Okay, that's the way to run it up the chain. So he was notified by a security guard that a resident of the property was armed with a rifle, and they believed, quote, he may start shooting people. According to the report, the manager and her assistant were going to leave the office when they saw Warrender, who made a motion with the rifle but did not point it directly at her. Okay. The report stated she believed that he was going to shoot her and feared for her life. I assume here we mean the he. She believed that he was going to shoot her and feared for her life. She and her assistant pushed multiple objects, including a desk, against a door in her office and hid. According to the report, a second security guard told police that he was standing behind the counter of the front desk, watching Warrender on the security cameras as the valet driver spoke with Warrender. While he was standing behind the desk, he saw Warrender walk toward him with the rifle in his hand. Everybody thinks they're talking while he's walking toward them, apparently. At 3:13 p.m., the report stated the security guard ducked below the counter at the same time that Warrender fired a shot in his direction. 1 minute later, security footage then appears to show Warrender's rifle malfunctioning before he tries to fix it. He then appears to aim the rifle in the direction of the security guard hiding behind the desk, but because the firearm was jammed, it did not fire. He then exits the building. The report stated a third security guard told police that when Warrender entered the lobby, he attempted to escape, believing that Warrender was going to shoot his rifle. When he walked through the front office, he heard a gunshot. He continued through the front office and exited the building through a side door. According to the report, as the third guard exited, he saw Warrender exiting the main entrance to the lobby while holding the rifle in his hand. The security guard told police he pulled out his handgun and fired 5 to 7 shots, actually 12 to 13, as it turns out, hitting Warrender, who fell to the ground. The timeline events, however, cites 12 to 13 rounds being fired at Warrender. The report stated he continued to hold Warrender at gunpoint until police arrived. He told police that he felt everyone in the area was in danger. He said he used deadly force to protect innocent citizens, believing that Warrender would have shot anyone he came across. The security guard told police that he is not asked to carry a firearm at the complex, but chooses to carry one anyway, the report stated. When the officers arrived, they found Warrender on the ground in front of the main entrance to Tower 1, still being held at gunpoint by the security officer. He had been shot several times in the thighs and abdomen. According to the report, Warrender was staying at the complex as a guest of one of the residents, his uncle. Officers conducted a welfare check in the uncle's room to make sure he was not injured or harmed. Using a key from maintenance, they entered the room but did not locate the uncle, but they did find that empty black case for the rifle, and Warrender went to the hospital. Now, circling back, just again, to what they report sort of matter-of-factly here, that this is now the third security guard. I'm not certain whether the other two are armed or not, but the one who's the hero, the one who carried the gun even though it wasn't required of him, but he did it to protect people in the area and wanted to act on their behalf for some reason, and why not? Acting on other people's behalf is a nice thing to do, is the third security guard. But he's, which one? He is this one here. That while the homeowners association manager and other person in the office there are barricading themselves in their office and hiding, and another security officer is hiding under the desk because he's afraid he's going to be shot, and the valet is who knows where, thinking he might be shot, that this, let's see, the second security guard was standing behind the desk. It's the second security guard that ducks behind the desk once Warrender takes a shot. And then the third one, who actually did the shooting in all of this, says what? He entered the lobby. Third security guard told police when Warrender entered the lobby, he, that is the third security guard, attempted to escape, believing that Warrender was going to shoot his rifle. So at the moment that the rifle comes up and good guy with a gun is in the same room with guy with the rifle, good guy with a gun, I mean, he's smart. Good guy with a gun runs, though. He doesn't draw and then square up and shoot the guy down. He runs and escapes out the side door, right? Let's see. He attempted to escape, believing Warrender was going to shoot. When he walked through the front office, he heard a gunshot. He continued through the front office and exited the building through a side door. And only, it says, when he exited, he then sees Warren there exiting the main entrance and shoots him. Which actually, I guess if he's shooting from a different angle, now I know where he is and he's not at the front desk. The video that's available on Twitter, I guess he would be shooting him from the side, not in the back. So I guess there's that, and maybe his medical reports will tell us where he's hit. But also in the heat of battle, he loses track of how many shots he's fired. And he's actually fired about twice the number of shots that he estimates he fired. Not uncommon, frequently the case in the excitement after such a shooting. But just wanted to throw that out there because 8 News Now, they've also expanded their reporting. Not a lot of this was available when I read it yesterday. I read it for the part about his saying, one of the security guards being alerted to the fact that a guy with a rifle shows up at the apartment complex and says, people can carry rifles. Sorry, wait till he starts shooting and then give us a call. Now, as it turns out, good guy with the gun who stands guard and squares up and fires on the actually ran away and escaped. Now, you're always told in the event of a mass shooting, the run, hide, fight thing. So run is priority number 1. I just thought that people who were envisioning themselves as the good guys with guns who were going to stand up for the rest of America and stop a mass shooter in their tracks weren't going to be the ones who ran. But I guess they are. So, I don't know. That's kind of interesting too. So all I wanted to point out there is we started with the notion from the Heritage Foundation nutball that it was indisputable that an armed civilian had stopped this guy, and that and why are people shying away from the good guy with the gun narrative? And it turns out that narrative is unclear and a little weird, and also involves mostly running away. But then if you actually run into the bad guy with the gun while you're running away from the bad guy with the gun, and he runs into you, then yeah, go ahead and shoot him, and you'll have stopped a mass shooting. I mean, I got to tell you, running away as the armed guard, the one guy who voluntarily carries the gun, maybe it even makes the situation worse. You weren't required to carry the gun. You're not expected necessarily to confront potential mass shooters as they come into the building. But if you want to, I guess that's okay. All right, well, I want to. Okay, well, then here's a mass shooter. You know what? I don't want to. Actually, I'm on my way. I gotta go. I'm late for a thing. I gotta wash my hair. And then, I don't know. It's not entirely clear. I mean, maybe his plan is I'm going to go out the side door and I'm going to circle around. But it's also possible that, as he said, he was walking through the front office and he hears a shot, but he doesn't see the shooter, and he makes his way to the side exit, and he's out of there. He doesn't. It's interesting, right? Oh, a good guy with a gun could run to the danger. These are the people you want, the heroes on the front lines who will run toward danger. Unless they run away from danger, and danger then later confronts them accidentally. Well, then they'll do something. And, if the guy accidentally runs into you, I guess you'd rather have a gun than not. Everyone would acknowledge that. It's just that this was a guy who made a conscious decision to bring a gun with him all the time in case just such a situation arose. And he's still kind of like, I'm going to do what the unarmed people do. I'm going to run away. Who could blame him? I mean, your life was in danger. I think that's what most people would do. It's just that you should realize that in reality, carrying the gun doesn't transform good guys with guns into heroes. Circumstances have to be right in order for it to work out. Like the shooter has to run into you and you have no choice but to do something. But anyway, I just thought by reading those additional articles, maybe they're wrong. Maybe more reporting will come out that will clarify those details and make them less convincing to us. But I don't know. It riled me up good over the weekend, so I figured it was a good way to spend an hour today talking about that, rather than the number of other things that we really have to get to, which we can do tomorrow and Friday, of course. And, maybe even record some of these things ahead of time so that we can have some new material to go to either while I'm on vacation or while we are taking the college boy number 2 to his orientation. That's going to happen Thursday is when we'll be out from that. But thanks to Rosalind McGregor, by the way, for sending along a couple of recorded segments that we could make use of in those situations and help us out and save me good 10 minutes worth of voice work in recording things for you. All right, let's see. Some things that we should shoehorn in before we get out of here for the day. One, well, we can save that for another day, but let's get to this one here. I think this is one of these judges possibly in the one or two judge divisions that we hear so much about in the judge shopping scandals, I would say, that are going on, because it's happening down in Louisiana. So the latest attack on policy making by the Biden administration. A federal judge limits Biden officials' contacts with social media sites, setting us up for more disinformation in the 2024 campaign, thanks to Russia probably, and who knows where else. The order came in a lawsuit filed by the attorneys general of Missouri and Louisiana, who claim the administration is trying to silence its critics. What's going on here, Stephen Lee Myers and David McCabe? Please tell me. And they do, because they work for the New York Times. A federal judge in Louisiana on Tuesday restricted the Biden administration from communicating with social media platforms about broad swaths of content online, a ruling that could curtail efforts to combat false and misleading narratives about the coronavirus pandemic and other issues. The order, which could have significant First Amendment implications, is a major development in a fierce legal fight over the boundaries and limits of speech online. It was a victory for Republicans, who have often accused social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube of disproportionately taking down right-leaning content, sometimes in collaboration with government. This is essentially the Twitter files theory gone wild. But it's very reminiscent of things that we've been hearing from even the Supreme Court recently, like the development that the 303 Creative case appears to be citing a request that, for all intents and purposes, looks to be a fake troll request, never actually posed by the person supposed to have sent it. That was of some interest. But between that and and Missouri standing for the loan processor, even though the loan processor didn't want to file suit, but going back to the days of broccoli mandates and Cornhusker kickbacks and the, I guess, short but important tradition, if you will, of the Supreme Court inventing the facts it needs, the praying coach case that we cited also last time we were speaking about this. This is stuff happening at the trial court level where they're essentially accepting the same sort of nonsense as a narrative to begin with. We believe in the Twitter files scandal story, even though it's not anything, just like the Hunter Biden laptop turns out to be. And we're just going to start ruling based on that. Right-wingers want us to believe the Twitter files, and so we will, and we'll make it the basis for rulings in federal court now. So it's a victory for Republicans who have often accused social media sites of taking down right-leaning content, sometimes in collaboration with the government. Democrats and right-thinking people say the platforms have failed to adequately police misinformation and hateful speech. That's true, leading to dangerous outcomes, including violence. In the ruling, Judge Terry A. Doughty, and I do believe he's one of the shopped for judges out there, of the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Louisiana, said that parts of the government, including the Department of Health and Human Services and the FBI, could not talk to social media companies for the purpose of urging, encouraging, pressuring, or inducing in any manner the removal, deletion, suppression, or reduction of content containing protected free speech. Of course, the question is, what's protected free speech? But now they'll have to deal with that red tape when they want to do something like delete pandemic misinformation or terroristic threats, for that matter. Is it free speech? I don't know. I say no, but what about the judge? We got to check with him. In granting a preliminary injunction, Judge Doughty said that the agencies could not flag specific posts to the social media platforms or request reports about their efforts to take down content. The ruling said that the government could still notify the platforms about posts detailing crimes, national security threats, or foreign attempts to influence elections, unless, of course, you're alerting those social media platforms to Donald Trump doing those things, in which case, no, that's free speech, you see. I'm sure that's the way it'll come out. If the allegations made by plaintiff are true, the present case arguably involves the most massive attacks against free speech in United States history, the judge said. I don't know about that. The plaintiffs are likely to succeed on the merits in establishing that the government has used its power to silence the opposition. Courts are increasingly being forced to weigh in on such issues with the potential to upend decades of legal norms that have governed speech online. The Republican attorneys general of Texas and Florida are defending first-of-their-kind state laws that bar internet platforms from taking down certain political content, and legal experts believe those cases may eventually reach the Supreme Court. The High Court this year declined to limit a law that allows the platforms to escape legal liability for content that users post on the sites. All right, time for us to play our outro and get the hell out of here. But the ruling on Tuesday in a lawsuit brought by the attorneys general of Louisiana and Missouri is likely to be appealed by the Biden administration, but its impact could force government officials, including law enforcement agencies, to refrain from notifying the platforms of troublesome content. Government officials have argued that they do not have the authority to order posts or entire accounts removed, but federal agencies and the tech giants have long worked together to take action against illegal or harmful material, especially in cases involving child sexual abuse, human trafficking, which was supposed to be a big concern for them, or other criminal activity. That has also included regular meetings to share information on the Islamic State and other terrorist groups. The White House said the Justice Department was reviewing the ruling and evaluating its next steps. We'll see which way they go, and it's a case to keep an eye on, and of course a judge to keep an eye on as well. I will check into it, but it seems to me that, I think we've seen this name. Judge Doughty, it says here, was appointed by Trump in 2017, has been sympathetic to conservative cases, having previously blocked the Biden administration's national vaccination mandate for healthcare workers and overturned its ban on new federal leases for oil and gas drilling. Why do those cases keep coming to him? Because, of course, they keep selecting him as the judge they want to hear those cases. That's what's going on. Keep an eye on it. We'll be back tomorrow with more news.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
But let's say you don't want to wait until tomorrow for more news. Well, you should stay tuned for Justice Putnam and a West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next. He's got on tap for you lots more. A lot of pundits speculate the extremism of the GOP base could make their favorite Republican candidates too toxic for the general election. But that's exactly how the base likes it. That and news to follow. Stay tuned.